There you go, guys. Back with another video. This one's going to be a brew day video, tasting video, all in one. Discuss the recipe, talk about the processes involved in this particular beer. This beer is the Lichtenhainer Historic Smoked Beer. So the East Coast Banksia cones. This is what we use to smoke the wheat over. Here it is in the barrel there, getting smoked. Quite a dense smoke, smoked over gidgee wood. So it came out smelling really good. You can see here it's quite a fine crush. Just to go a little bit better with the Robo Brew, the Series 1 Robo Brew. A finer crush we've found seems to work a lot better with efficiency. So mashing in here, excuse my fingers over the camera there. As you can see, once again, yeah, it is a very fine crush. Reading up on a few historic beers, and it wasn't uncommon for them to actually add flour to the grains as part of the mashing in process. So probably it being as fine as what it is, quite more sort of floury, more powdery, something you would have probably come across back then. With the mash process, we introduced some dark grain, which we'll talk a little bit about in the tasting video and about the recipe itself. We just top loaded this roasted barley, so it's just sat on the top of the mash there and done its thing, and then was rinsed through when we done the final sparge. So let's do the tasting and the recipe breakdown for the Lichtenhainer Smokescreen German Historic beer here. So 21 litre batch, 3 litres of loss, 60-minute boil. We sort of lifted that up to about 70 minutes from the 60. Just going over back one of the original recipes, a couple of original recipes that we'd sort of researched. But ours does have a bit of a spin on it, as you've seen through the intro. The use of Banksia cones to smoke the wheat. So yeah, it's 70-minute boil instead of the 60-minute. 80% mash efficiency, 26.79 mash volume, 4.05 litres of sparge volume. Come in at a 1050. Final gravity was the 1008 as planned. 9.5 IBUs is low. There's not a lot of bitterness or sort of hop structure to this particular beer. 27.1 EBCs, which was higher than what we originally had in, due to the introduction of that small amount of roast barley to top load over the mash. So 5.52% ABV. So the grain additions were Craft Export Pilsner from Joe White Maltings, 1.6 kilos, 1.6 kilos of the wheat malt, 1.5 kilos of the smoked malt, so the Banksia smoked wheat. So traditionally it would be a 3-part grain recipe, so 1/3 of each of those, but we opted to bring down the excuse me, the weight of the smoked wheat, and introduce that 100 grams of roast barley for the top loading. We went in at 45 minutes for 30 minutes for the mash, and then ramped it up to 55 for 30 minutes, and then went with an hour at 65 and mashed out at 75. So stepped it up through that mash process for a bit there. It's just something that I normally do as well with the there is a fair amount of wheat in this, so just to help it through a little bit. Next time I will use I will throw in some rice hulls for this brew. Herstbrucker, 6 grams at the 60-minute mark. So instead of putting it in at 70, we did still add that at the 60-minute mark, just to keep those IBUs at 9.5, no more than 10 for this particular beer. That was pellets. We were going to use a little bit of the remainder of the homegrown Hersbrucker here, but that would have required double the amount, and the final volume we sort of wanted to keep best we could, and the flowers do suck up a lot of the wort towards the end, depending on how much you add in. Found that we could lose anywhere up to 600 mils, close to a litre, depending on the amount of wet hop or actually dried flower cones that we put in. We did pitch, due to the fact that this is a co-pitched sort of beer, does require a bug to be pitched on top of a normal yeast. We use Philly sour, so we actually did it for a number of days before and tasted it before we decided to throw in the next lot of yeast, which was actually K97, which is the German ale yeast from Safal. Their K97 worked quite well, and then went for a varying degrees of fermentation temperature as well to mix it up a little bit. So up there a little bit high with 18 degrees, then dropped it down a little bit with that Philly sour just to sort of help taper it off and not let it get too aggressive with the sourness in this. So you want smokiness and sourness to be pretty much equal parts in this particular beer. And then introduced that K97 and just ramped up the temperature a little bit there, and then bring it back down again. So fluctuations, not a hell of a lot of fluctuations there. It was about 2 degrees, 18 down to 16, back up to 18, back down to 16 over that time. Whether that's made any difference, whether it's a wrong move or not, doesn't really matter. It's first time doing this. It's always, as mentioned, probably going to need tweaks and obvious ongoing experimentation, but that is pretty much what it is. Let's taste this beer. So I've already sort of poured it up, I just got to finish pouring it off. It was quite fluffy there to begin with. I think it's due to the fact there is a little bit of turbulence in the lines, freshly coming onto keg. So here we are. It is darker than what we wanted it to. Not much darker. I mean, to get a decent amount of light through, it's still a nice looking beer. I don't think that amount of barley would have done this to the colour of it. I think it's more of the aggressive boil, and maybe a little bit of that colour's coming from the smoked malt as well. So all in all, I'm quite happy with the smoke volume that's come through. I think maybe a little bit longer. Maybe a little bit more wet conditioning as well for the start of the smoking of the malt, and probably we'll build some extra racks so that we can spread it out a little bit more and get some more sort of smoke over the grains. Other than that, it's actually still quite a smoky beer. On the aroma and on the flavour, as I went through the tastings just to make sure everything was right. We've got the right amount of sourness versus the right amount of smokiness. So it smells absolutely delicious. It just has that, I guess, like an alt beer sort of thing going on there. Some people won't bother using a smoked malt in an alt beer. A lot of people are starting to do it. Particularly using an oak smoked grain, or there's red gum, and there's obviously beechwood. So it looks good, smells good, tastes good. The sourness is probably a little bit more than what I wanted versus the smoke that's in the aroma and the flavour. So therefore I stated that maybe next time we will bump it up, do a little bit different on the smoker, go aggressive, go very thick and dense, but more more spreading that grain out and a little bit more wet conditioning, so we get more of that cling from the smoke. For a first go at this this style, a very historic, little known. Some Australian breweries have been doing them. There's a few out there. Dollar Bill Brewing done one, I think, but theirs was an imperial style. So we do have imperial, a dark, the standard, and then we were going to do possibly to smoke every grain that's going in it and see how that comes out too, and then really hitting it hard with the Philly sour, maybe step feeding the K97 when it goes in, let the sour do its thing all the way through, and then bring a step feed into for the K97 to feed on. Anyway, that's the tasting. Not the ideal, not the best brew day sort of introduction there, but it's short, sweet, easiest way to go about doing it. Try and stick to about a 10-minute brew day, or 10 minutes on the video. Wish I could do a 10-minute brew day from start to finish, but it's not going to happen. Cheers.